Today is October 15th and I'm going to attempt to grow onions from seed. I have this variety that's called Texas Grano 1015 and it's perfect because today is October 15th. This is what the seeds look like. This is a short day variety of onions since we live in the south, and that's the variety that grows well here. If you live in a cooler climate or up north, then you need to grow long day variety of onions. I already pre-filled the pots with some soil from old plants from earlier this year. I decided not to buy a new container mix because it's pricey these days. Instead, I added some all-purpose organic granular fertilizer into the soil and mixed it with the soil. Onion seeds need to be planted at a depth of 1/4 inch, so I'm going to simply sprinkle a little bit on the surface of this container here. Now I'm going to take this additional soil and cover the seeds with about 1/4 inch soil. I already made the soil moist, so I don't need to moist again, but I will water the seeds after I cover them up. Tonight our temperature is supposed to get into the 40s Fahrenheit, and it's a little bit chilly for onion seeds to germinate. For that reason, I'm going to possibly bring them inside and keep them inside until they sprout, and then I might take them outside. But I'm sure we'll get some freezing temperatures during the winter, so I might have to keep all the pots inside through the winter. None of the onion seeds that we planted came up, so I had to reorder new onion seeds. They were fresh from this year, and this time I ordered from Johnny's Seed hybrid yellow onions, Madeline F1. I planted them on November 3rd, and in about 4 days I started seeing the very first signs of greens. And today is November 25th, and you can see that our onions are looking great. They're growing under a grow light. The only thing I do is water them regularly, making sure that their soil stays moist, because onions, they are heavy feeders and they love water. So we let our onions grow under this grow light till about January or beginning of February. Then I'll set them outside to harden them off, and then we plant them outside in the ground. Today is December 10th. Our onions are growing well, but the only problem is that I've neglected them, and I'm going to fertilize them with liquid fish fertilizer. I'm going to dilute 2 tablespoons of this fish fertilizer in 1 gallon of water. I already have 1 gallon of water pre-filled in this former milk jug. So we have 2 tablespoons of liquid fish fertilizer in here. I'm simply going to shake up this jug to make sure that the fertilizer mixes well with the water. And then I'm going to water the seedlings from the top. I could do it from the bottom, but from the top is also okay. And I'm going to pour a generous amount of water since the soil is extremely dry. And it's not good for the onions to stay in the dry soil because that can create stress on the onions, and then they might go to seed earlier than they need to. Anything can cause stress for onions, so it's very important in growing onions to make sure that we water them well, because onions require a lot of water, and also protect them from the elements when necessary. It also helps that these pots are sitting in this tray. That way the water will be collecting in this tray, then it will be soaked up by the soil eventually, and then all of the soil will be evenly moist. Today is January 28th, 2024. It's hard to believe it's a new year, but our onions have grown nicely. I have 4 pots of them like this. All this time they have been under a grow light, and today I'm going to transplant them in the ground. This week is supposed to be in the 60s, so the weather is going to be perfect for them to be planted outside without having to harden them off. The low this week is going to be above 32 degrees Fahrenheit, so I don't have to cover them. If it was below 32 degrees Fahrenheit, I would have to cover them to protect them from a freeze. But once they're established, they should be good to tolerate light freeze and frost. So I'm going to get these onions out of this container. I'm going to press on the sides of the container to loosen up the soil. I don't want to damage the roots. I want to keep them intact as much as possible. And here's our root system. It looks great. So now I'm going to gently press on the soil and loosen it up to separate the onions. Okay, you can see that some of the roots got torn and separated. That's okay. We'll hope that the rest of the roots are still attached to the plants themselves. Just going to shake off the dirt to release the onions. It looks like a lot of the onions have nice roots, so I'm going to plant them like this. The roots are not very long. If the roots are too long, then I'm going to simply trim them so they would fit in the soil where I'm gonna plant them like that, and we'll go ahead and plant them in the ground. This is a brand new in-ground bed that we created this year. We spread some cow manure and llama manure and mixed it with the soil. And also, since onions are heavy feeders, I sprinkled a generous amount of all-purpose granular fertilizer and mixed it with the soil. It looks like in this in-ground bed, I would be able to get 5 rows, and I don't think I have that many onions to fill up all the rows, so I might use front rows to plant flowers in there. The soil is already moist from all the rains that we've gotten, so I'm not gonna water it again. And I'm just going to take my onion bulb and plant it about 1/2 inch deep, or maybe 1 inch deep. If you feel like it's too loose, you can certainly plant them deeper. But the main rule about planting onions is not to plant them too deep, so that the bulbs would have enough space to bulb up and become large. I'm going to plant onions about 4 inches away from each other in rows about 1 foot apart. After I plant the onions, I'm going to water them, but the soil is gonna stay moist because it's still cool outside. But once it gets warmer and I feel like the soil starts drying up faster, I will have to set up drip irrigation. I will also be watering our onions in the ground with liquid fish fertilizer and more bloom. Today is February 25th, and we have a little problem with our onions. When I transplanted them into the ground, a lot of the roots got separated from the onions, and so I planted them directly in the ground without any roots. And you can see that some of the onions have lost their tops. The tops withered and died, and they look like the onions might have died. But I think these onions, specifically this one, is actually growing new roots, and so is this one. You can see it doesn't have any tops. But if I try to pull it, it's not coming out because I think the new roots started growing. So let me try to pull it gently and see what's going on underneath. Yeah, I can definitely feel that the new roots started growing, which is a good sign. And here's our little bulb. Even though the top looks like it's dead, we see that new roots started growing. And so we'll put it back here. Today is March 17th, and our onions are looking great. You can see that I spread some mulch because it's getting warmer and the soil dries out much faster. And also you can see that our onions are growing very nice green leaves. They're getting thicker. I was a little bit worried about them, but I can see that onions are more resilient than we think they are. So they're growing new roots and new leaves. Today is April 28th, and our onions have started bulbing up. Onions can be used for cooking or eating at any stage of their growth. For example, I could pick up these onions now and use them in cooking or in salads. But for storage, the onion tops need to be fallen over for the onions to be stored properly. And you can see that some of our onion tops have fallen over, but I think the reason here is that some animal has been visiting our backyard and just walking everywhere, trampling the onions. Or the other reason might be that we had a lot of rain last night and the tops fell over because of that. End of April is still early to harvest onions. The earliest time to harvest onions here in North Texas would be May. So we will wait till the end of May to harvest our onions. Today is May 18th, and our onions are ready to be harvested. I can tell that they're ready to be harvested by 3 signs. The first one, their outer skins turns brown and papery. The second sign is their tops flop over, and the third sign, the tops turn yellowish and brown. When we harvest onions, we make sure to do it carefully, not to throw them around, because otherwise they will get bruised and that will encourage onion rot. After we harvest them, we will cure them in the back porch where it stays dry, shaded at all times. And I'm gonna lay them in a single layer and keep them like that for about 2 to 4 weeks until the tops completely dry out and the neck of the onions have dried out also. The neck of the onions is the place that connects the tops with bulbs. After the onions are done curing, I will remove the roots and also the tops to about 1 inch from the bulb, and I'll store them in mesh bags. Onions can also be stored in cardboard boxes where you punch holes to encourage more air circulation so the onions would not rot. Ideally, onions need to be stored in a root cellar at temperature between 35 degrees Fahrenheit to 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Unfortunately, we don't have such conditions, so I'm simply going to store them in mash bags in our back porch. That's what I did last summer, and that worked out fine. And the variety of onions that we use don't store well anyway. They will store for up to 3 months. Long day varieties that are grown in colder climates can be stored for up to a year. I'm really happy with the way these onions grew from seed. They're not very large, but considering that we created this in-ground bed just last year, they have grown to a nice size. And that's how we grow onions from seed here in North Texas. Thank you so much for watching this video, and have a great day.